We are on Daf Ayin Aleph Amid Base 71b in the middle of the Mishnah, and today's Daf is Ayin Base 72. So the Mishnah begins, the parak begins with things that you're allowed to do for a Korban Pesach on Shabbos, and that which you're not allowed to do for a Korban Pesach on Shabbos. And we saw earlier already that if somebody brought a Korban Pesach with the intent of it being a different type of Korban, that it is invalid. And therefore, if on Shabbos somebody brings a Korban Pesach with the intent of it being a different Korban, so that's going to be invalid because as we said, a Korban Pesach for intent of something else is invalid. And since it's invalid, even though that they meant to do a mitzvah, they didn't do a mitzvah, and they will have transgressed Shabbos and have to bring a chatas offering. Any other korban brought as a Pesach, so it'll depend. If it's not worthy of being a Korban Pesach, meaning it's a female, it's more than a year old, it's a calf instead of a sheep or a goat, etc. So then it's not a valid korban. So he will have transgressed Shabbos. If, however, it is possible to be a valid korban, so the Rabbi Eliezer nevertheless says, even though that he intended to do a mitzvah, and there is some level of mitzvah that was indeed done, but nevertheless it's not what was supposed to be done. Rabbi Eliezer says that Chayev, he transgresses Shabbos and needs a korban, a chatas, a sin offering. Rabbi Yeshua exempts him because he did a mitzvah. So since he intended to do a mitzvah, a tov, awesome mitzvah, he intended to do a mitzvah, and by mistake forgot or transgressed something, but in the end also did a mitzvah, so then he would be exempt of the chatas offering. Rabbi Eliezer made an argument and said, well, the Pesach right now is an obligation. Nevertheless, if you brought it with the wrong intent, you're going to have to bring a sin offering. So for sure, all other kabbanas, which is the wrong time to bring it, if you brought it for the wrong intent, it's going to be, you're going to transgress and have to bring a chatas offering. Rabbi Yeshua says, no comparison. Here, the reason that you don't have to bring a chatas, a sin offering for this, is because you intended for something that actually is a mitzvah. It's true, you're not supposed to bring the other offerings right now. You're not supposed to bring, let's say, a shalamim right now. But if you brought it with the intent of it being a Pesach, which you are supposed to bring, so that is the right intent, and therefore you're exempt. Rabbi Eliezer responds with the karbanos of Shabbos, the other communal karbanos, which are brought on every Shabbos, and they're what you're supposed to be doing. And yet, if somebody brings a different korban with the intent of it being the karbanos of Shabbos, he has to bring a chatas offering. To which Rabbi Yeshua says, yeah, that's because there's no reason for you to make that mistake. That you're not under time pressure, you're not under any reason of focus that you should have been bringing other karbanos. You already brought the Shabbos karbanos. There's only a few karbanos to have brought. So why would you have made this mistake? And that's why you're obligated a chatas offering. Whereas in regards to Pesach, there are so many karbanos coming. So if you made a mistake and brought a shalamim, and mistakenly brought it as the chatas, as the Pesach offering, that's what you're supposed to be thinking at this time. That all the karbanos that you see are supposed to be coming as a Pesach, and you brought it by mistake for the wrong thing. So that's why it's reasonable that you would have made such a mistake on Shabbos. Ta bidvar mitzvah, you made a mistake in regards to a mitzvah matter, and indeed it ended up being a mitzvah matter. That's why you're exempt from a chatas offering. You don't bring a chatas. Rabbi Meir, and this is where we're up to, Rabbi Meir actually challenges the whole notion that Rabbi Eliezer said. And it says, no, actually, if you bring a korban on Shabbos with the intent of it being a Shabbos offering, you will indeed, even in such a case, be exempt of a chatas offering, because tabid var mitzvah asa mitzvah. You intended to do a mitzvah and you indeed did a mitzvah, and the fact that you had no reason to make such a mistake is not enough to obligate you. Rabbi Meir Omer, and this is the fifth to last line on Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph. Rabbi Meir Omer afa sheichel l'shem emurei tzibur poter. Now, even if somebody does bring a offering that's not supposed to be brought on Shabbos, and he brings it with the intent of it being a Shabbos offering, he will be exempt, because Tavid Var Mitzvah Asa Mitzvah, even in a case where he didn't have this time pressure or many other kabbanas to confuse it with, nevertheless, he will have done a mitzvah and therefore is exempt. The Mishnah now lists other invalidations of such a korban that if you did it on Shabbos, it would constitute as not having done a mitzvah, and you bring a chatas offering. Shachta shaloi loichlav, that you brought the Pesach, but you brought it with intent of people that cannot eat. Shaloi lemnuyav, or for people that were not designated to that group. La'arelim, for people that were all uncircumcised. L'tameim, people that were all tamei. Chayiv. So now this is not a valid korban Pesach as we saw in the previous Mishnah, and therefore, having done it on Shabbos, bringing an invalid korban, chayiv, you bring a sin offering for transgressing Shabbos. However, you brought it for a mixed group. Some can and some cannot eat. Or for a mixed group, some people designated on the korban, some not. Or a mixed group, some people had a bris and some people didn't. Some people are tamei, some people are tor. Potter. So then you're going to be exempt, as we saw earlier, that's still a valid korban. So too here, it's going to be a valid enough korban not to have transgressed Shabbos. You shechted it and you find out that after you shechted it, you've noticed that it had a blemish. You should have checked it beforehand. So chayiv, that's something you could have known. And so you bring a sin offering for having transgressed Shabbos by not checking beforehand and shechting an animal that's not a valid korban. However, if you shechted it and find somewhere on the inside there's an invalidation, a treifa is something that causes it to not count as a kosher korban, kosher meat really, on account of that it could die from this ailment, whatever specific ailment it is. There are 18 treifas. Potter, so he's going to be exempt because how could he ever know? If he shechted it with the intent of the correct people that can eat and they're on this group, everything was right, and then later finds out that at the time that he shechted, they had already left the group and joined a different seder, or they had died, or they had all become tamei. Pati is going to be exempt because at the time of shechting, he did the right thing of shechting this animal, even though it was Shabbos. He shechted with the understanding and knowledge that these were the people that were designated on it, and they backed out or they became tamei. And so at the time, he did the right thing. Now we go to Ayin Beis Amud Aleph, 72a, the beginning of the Gemara. The Gemara is going to analyze this idea of having brought a korban Pesach for something else, or a different korban for Pesach, whether that counts as having done the transgress Shabbos or not. So, but my asking, what are we talking about? That means he made a mistake. He thought this was originally a korban Pesach, and mistakenly he inadvertently brought it as a shalamim. Shemas mina akira b'toas hava akira. What you're telling me is that even though I didn't intentionally uproot this korban from what it was originally designated and intended as something else, but just passively did so by mistake, and I didn't purposefully do so, that it counts as an akira. It counts as having uprooted it, even though I didn't explicitly or expressly say that I wanted to uproot and undo the original designation. And the problem with that is that this is a machlokas in the Gemara and Menachos, whether that's true or not. Ella, so we have to say that the first line in the Mishnah is also talking about ba'okir. is specifically talking about, but like when he expressly uprooted the carbon from its original designation and said it's no longer a carbon Pesach, I want this to be a Shalomim. Ema Seifa. Let's see the next part. Or the Mishnah said in the reverse, not that you had a Pesach and brought it as a Shalomim, but the other way around, I had a Shalomim and brought it as a Pesach. If it's unworthy of being a Pesach, such as it's a calf instead of a lamb, it's a female instead of a male, it's more than a year old, etc. So then he transgresses. And if it is able to be a carbon Pesach, meaning it's worthy of being a carbon Pesach, so then Rabbi Yeshua exempts him, and Rabbi Eliezer says he's obligated. Now, but if he expressly changed it, saying this is no longer a Shalomim, I'm making this into a Chatas, Mali Ru'uyim, Mali She'en Ru'uyim. Who cares whether it is intentional, whether it's worthy of being a Pesach or not? You can't tell me this is a ta'abid var mitzvah, that somebody tried to do a mitzvah but was mistaken about it. He didn't try to do the mitzvah. He changed it from what it was. This is not a ta'abid var mitzvah. So why would Rabbi Yeshua exempt him? This is a expressly saying I'm changing something from what it's meant to be. So must be that in that second part of the Mishnah where Rabbi Yeshua exempts him, the reason is because he was trying to do a mitzvah, didn't expressly say this is a Shalomim, but no longer I'm changing it to a Pesach. Just simply didn't realize in the mix of the thousands and thousands of Pesach offerings, there's a Shalomim there, and just brought it as a Pesach without realizing that it was really something else, and intending to do a mitzvah. And that's the exemption that Rabbi Yeshua has, since it's a ta'abid var mitzvah. They were made a mistake while intending to do a mitzvah, va'asa mitzvah, and indeed it worked out to be a mitzvah. But you need the first part, that there was an intention to do a mitzvah and it was a mistake. So must be that it was not purposefully and expressly uprooted from its original intent, original designation. So we have to say, Reisha, the first line in the Mishnah, Ba'ikir, he expressly changes it from its original designation. V'sefer b'toya, and the second one is a mistake where he just didn't realize what the first designation was. Amar Rabbi Avinin. So Rabbi Avin says, yeah, we're going to have to explain the Mishnah that way. Reisha ba'ikir v'sefer b'toya. The first line is when he expressly changed it, and the second line is where he mistakenly changed it for something else. Ashkeche Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef lo Rabbi Abo. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef met Rabbi Abo. They have a koi be'uchlusa de inchi. He was in a large group of people. Amalein, he said to him, Masnitin mai. How do you explain our Mishnah? What's your teaching on our Mishnah? Amalein, so he said to him, Reisha ba'ikar v'sefer b'toya. He said to him, the first line has to be interpreted where he expressly changed it from a Pesach into something else. And that's why it's uprooted from its obligation right now, and it doesn't count. And the Seifa, the second line in the Mishnah, is talking about where he inadvertently included a Shlomim as a Pesach, but didn't expressly change it from what it originally was. So he reviewed that with him 40 times so that he would not forget it. And in doing so, it was so well absorbed by him, like it was sitting in his pocket. Tana. So the Gemara is now analyzing our Mishnah. Ma im Pesach shemuta l'shmoi. So Rabbi Eliezer argued against Rabbi Yeshua and says, wait, but a Pesach, which if you intended it as a Pesach, that's what you're supposed to be doing, even though it's Shabbos. However, if you changed its name, chayiv, then you're going to have transgressed Shabbos, and we just interpreted that to mean he expressly said, "This is no longer a Korban Pesach. I'm making this as something else," and then you transgress Shabbos because it's not a valid Korban for something else right now. Zavachim shehem asuran lishma, other offerings which you're not allowed to bring as their own designation. Yet, if you brought it as a Pesach, Keshashina Shaman, if you brought it as a Pesach, it's going to be valid. How could that be? For sure, it's not supposed to be. If something you're supposed to bring now, if you changed it, it's going to be invalid, and you bring a sin offering for transgressing Shabbos, then for sure something you're not supposed to bring now that you changed from its designation should be a transgression of Shabbos. Now, the Gemara analyzes, how can you compare the two? We just said that the first line in the Mishnah, which says that it was supposed to be a Pesach and you changed it out of Pesach, that's where you expressly said it's no longer a Pesach, it's something else. Whereas the second line, that's a case where he mistakenly changed it. He didn't expressly change it from what it was. So how can Rabbi Eliezer ask a question by comparing one halacha to the other? They're different scenarios. If you're correct, then the first line, the reason why he transgresses Shabbos and it doesn't count is because he expressly said it's no longer the carbon it was meant to be. Whereas in the second case, the reason that the reason why Rabbi Yeshua says it's valid is because it wasn't expressly uprooted. So Gemara says, Rabbi Eliezer le'shanile. Rabbi Eliezer indeed does not make a distinction between whether you expressly uprooted it or passively uprooted it. He says it's uprooted, it's changed. So for him, there's no difference. Rabbi Yeshua deshanile, but Rabbi Yeshua, who makes such a distinction, so he should respond to Rabbi Eliezer and say, "Oh, to me there is a distinction because he didn't expressly uproot it." Nishanile hachi. So hachi kamale. Gemara says you're right. He could have responded that, but he responds according to Rabbi Eliezer's own interpretation. Lididi, he says, to me, I have a good. It's not a bothersome question. There's no comparison from the first line to the second line, because the first line in the Mishnah, where it was a Pesach and he's making it something else, he expressly says it's not a Pesach anymore. I'm bringing it as something else, so it's invalid. The second line is passive. It is not expressive, expressly changing it. It's just by mistake he did so. And therefore it's going to still be valid. Liditcha, however, according to you, that you make no such distinction. Nevertheless, I can respond to you and say that the reason why the second line is going to be the second line won't be a transgression of Shabbos is because he actually did a mitzvah. Im amras b'Pesach shashina shemai, by Pesach, where you changed it out of a Pesach to something else, you changed it l'davar ha'asa. You changed it into something that you're not allowed to do right now. Whereas if it was a different carbon and you're bringing it as a Pesach now, so even though you're not supposed to do that, but you changed it into something that now's the correct time to do it. So the reason you didn't transgress Shabbos and bring a chatas offering is because it actually fulfilled the mitzvah, because you brought it for something that's supposed to be. And the halacha is that you bring a carbon shaloi lishman, that it counts as a valid carbon as long as it counts as a valid carbon. It's only that it's not going to work for the owner to fulfill their obligation, but it'll be a valid carbon. So it's the Torah b'dvar mitzvah. It's somebody that made a mistake while trying to do a mitzvah, va'asa mitzvah, and indeed fulfilled a mitzvah. So they're exempt. Amalei Rabbi Eliezer Muratziba Yachichu. So what was Rabbi Eliezer's response? Well, every carbon that you bring on Shabbos for the Shabbos offerings should not be a transgression of Shabbos, and you should not have to bring a chatas offering. And the halacha is that you do. Shehem merubin and muratziba yachichu. Shehem mutarid, because those are permissible. And so if you bring a different carbon as a Shabbos offering, which is supposed to be brought, nevertheless, there is a chatas offering. Lishman, yet if somebody brings a different carbon on Shabbos for a Shabbos offering, you're going to transgress Shabbos. So why don't we say over there, tabidvar mitzvah vasa mitzvah, that he tried to do a mitzvah, made a mistake, and indeed fulfilled the mitzvah, so he should be exempt. Amalei Rabbi Yeshua, to which Rabbi Yeshua had responded in our Mishnah, on a weekday, on a regular year-round Shabbos, the reason why he's held liable is because there's only a few karbanos to be brought on Shabbos, and he should have he should have known what he was doing, and he made a mistake. So he's held responsible for that. Whereas, Tamar ben Pesach, but on the 14th day in Nisan, when everybody's bringing Karban Pesach, there are thousands upon thousands of Karbanos brought, she'en la kitzva. There's no end, there's no limit to how much of a carbon should have been brought. So you can't hold him responsible for making such a mistake. How is he supposed to know that there wasn't another carbon to be brought? So now the Gemara challenges this idea. So you, Rabbi Yeshua, say that as long as there was not a reasonable mistake made, that he's held responsible. Well, what about the case of two babies born, and one bris was on Shabbos, one was not supposed to be on Shabbos, and the confusion happened and they were switched. So this is possible in two scenarios with two possibilities of mistakes. It could be that one baby was born on Friday, one was born on Shabbos. So the next Friday, baby A is supposed to have a bris, and on Shabbos, baby B is supposed to have a bris, and they were confused. And baby A, whose bris was supposed to be on Friday, and it does not supersede on Shabbos, because you're not supposed to do a bris like that on Shabbos. Only a bris on the 8th day is supposed to be brought on Shabbos, is supposed to be done on Shabbos. So baby B is supposed to have a bris on Shabbos, but baby A's bris was done on Shabbos. That would be a transgression of Shabbos, but you'd be exempt because you actually fulfilled a mitzvah, because the bris was valid, even though that it wasn't supposed to happen, but it's valid because it's after the 8th day. If a baby's bris was not done on the 8th day, the next day that you do it is indeed going to fulfill the mitzvah. This scenario is possible in two ways. Either that baby B, who's supposed to be on Shabbos, was done early on Friday, or it wasn't done yet, and there's still an obligation to do baby B on Shabbos. And then the other scenario is where baby A was born on Shabbos, baby B was born on Sunday, and the following week, baby A's bris is supposed to be on Shabbos, B is supposed to be on Sunday, and there was a confusion, and baby B, who's supposed to be on Sunday, was done on Shabbos early, and that's not a valid bris, and therefore, because the mitzvah hadn't come yet, and so that mistake is you intended to do a mitzvah, you intended to do a mitzvah, made a mistake, and didn't end up doing a mitzvah because it's not even a valid bris, and that would be an invalidation. So now the Gemara is going to analyze this. In these cases, why was he even? Why does this count as a mistake for a mitzvah or not for a mitzvah? In any case, there is only one bris to be done, so he shouldn't be under pressure. He should know that he doesn't have to do this. By Tinokas, that there's just one baby to do a bris for, and therefore there is no mistakes that should be happening. And yet we learn two babies. One whose bris is supposed to happen after Shabbos, meaning Sunday, and one whose bris is supposed to happen on Shabbos itself. So there's only one baby that needs to have a bris. And he did a bris for the baby, the second baby, which is supposed to be on Sunday. He did it early on Shabbos. Chayiv. Now he transgressed because there was no mitzvah done since it's done early. However, if it's the other way around, the echad l'mula be'erev Shabbos v'echad l'mula b'Shabbos, where the baby A's bris is supposed to be Friday and B's is supposed to be on Shabbos, v'shachach amal shal erev Shabbos b'Shabbos, and he made a mistake. And baby A, whose bris is supposed to be on Friday, he did a bris on Shabbos, which does fulfill the obligation of bris for that baby, but it's not supposed to be done on Shabbos. Rabbi Eliezer says he's held liable. He broke Shabbos. He has to bring a sin offering. Chayav chatas. Rabbi Yeshua exempts him because he tried to do a mitzvah, did a mitzvah, and even though that was the wrong thing to do, he fulfilled the mitzvah, and so he's exempt. Why? There's no reason to make a mistake. There was only one baby to do a bris for, and so what mistake is there? Rami explained the scenario is that actually the baby baby B, whose bris is supposed to be on Shabbos, didn't have a bris yet. It's not that he did the bris earlier. It brought that by mistake. They swapped the babies. He just didn't do any of the brises yet. So when he came to Shabbos, he knew he has a bris to do, and there are two babies that still need a bris, and he was mistaken about the fact that this one is not the eighth day, and he shouldn't be doing it today. But he had a bris to do, and there are two babies in front of him that need a bris. The Ikahach Shabbos, the Torah Bay, that he's already involved and obligated in doing a bris on Shabbos for baby B, whose correct eighth day is today, and therefore it counts as if he's already done. Sorry, it counts as if he's trying to do a mitzvah, and therefore, since he's trying to do a mitzvah, and he has mitzvahs that he's intent on doing, even though that this one was a mistake, he shouldn't have done it, he's going to be exempt because he's a ta'ah b'dvar mitzvah, because there's a mitzvah in front of him to do, and he's in the middle of doing or trying to do that mitzvah. He made a mistake, he's going to be exempt because he ultimately did fulfill a mitzvah. However, here in regards to the carbon on Shabbos, you know the scenario that we're talking about, that he's going to be that he brought other karbanos with the intent of it being a Shabbos carbon. That scenario is talking about that he already completed all the Shabbos offerings and had no reason to be thinking that he's doing a Shabbos offering because those are already done. He first brought all of the communal offerings already, and therefore there's no mitzvah to be done. So the Gemara says, wait, if that's the case, if that's the case, why is the third opinion in the Mishnah Rabbi Meir who says that even in such a case he's going to be exempt? Why? He already knows all the offerings of Shabbos have been brought. And now he takes another carbon and says, I'm bringing this as a Shabbos offering. But why are you doing that? We already brought the Shabbos offerings. So in what way is this a mistake about a mitzvah that we can exempt him? Rabbi Meir says, even if he's already done all the obligations that he has for the day. Wait, Vahatani, we learned in regards to this, we have a brisa that says Rabbi Chia of this particular place said, Amar Rabbi Meir, in the name of Rabbi Meir, that Rabbi Eliezer and Yeshua do not disagree. This is Rabbi Meir's opinion. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua do not disagree. Where there's one bris, that's one baby whose bris is supposed to be Friday, baby A. Baby B's bris is supposed to be on Shabbos. And he brought the baby A, whose bris was supposed to be on Friday, and did it on Shabbos. The chayiv. There he will have transgressed, because he did a bris from Friday to Shabbos, and at this point we think that the reason of Rabbi Meir is that he brought both of them with he did both of the brises on Shabbos, the chayiv, and so he's going to transgress. Al ma nechlaku. And what is the machlokas? Al shahayu lo shtei tinokos. He had two babies that needed a bris. Echad lamul achar Shabbos, ve'echad lamul Shabbos. Baby A on Shabbos, baby B after Shabbos on Sunday. So the time hadn't come yet. V'shachach u'mola shel achar Shabbos v'Shabbos, and he did both brises of for the Shabbos bris as well as the Sunday bris on Shabbos. The Rabbi Eliezer mechayev chatas. Rabbi Eliezer says he's held responsible. It doesn't count as a mitzvah. And it doesn't exempt him on account of that he tried to do a mitzvah. And Rabbi Yeshua exempts him because he tried to do a mitzvah. And so according to that, that's the reason he's going to be exempt over there, because he's trying to do a mitzvah and he had a mitzvah to be done. But by Karban, where all the mitzvahs are already done, why would Rabbi Meir say he's exempt? Mitzvah patar. Rabbi Yeshua, now think about this. If that's true, that where he didn't end up doing a mitzvah, in the second case, because he brought a Sunday bris on Shabbos, which is too early. Yet Rabbi Yeshua says he's exempt. So why would Rabbi Yeshua agree in the first case that he's obligated to bring a sin offering? He transgressed Shabbos. He did a mitzvah, even though he wasn't supposed to do the Friday bris on Shabbos, but he fulfilled a mitzvah. So that should be an exemption. Amri Devei Rav Yanai, so therefore, in the Academy of Rav Yanai, they explained it this way: Reisha kagun shekadam amol shel Shabbos be'erev Shabbos. That the first scenario is not talking about that he did both brises, that one that's supposed to be on Friday and one that's supposed to be on Shabbos, and he did them both on Shabbos. Because indeed, in that case, Rabbi Yeshua would say you're exempt because he's trying to do a mitzvah. He has a mitzvah to do. Baby B's bris is supposed to be today, and he's trying to do a mitzvah by doing baby A's bris as well today. So he has a mitzvah to do. He's trying to do a mitzvah, and indeed fulfills a mitzvah because the bris was on is a valid bris. It's just not supposed to be done on Shabbos, so he'd be exempt. The scenario rather is that he didn't do both of them on Shabbos, but he swapped the babies. He thought baby A is baby B and baby B is baby A, and so Friday came, and Friday morning he did a bris. Great celebration. He did the bris, but that baby is actually only 7 days old. It was the bris that was supposed to be on Shabbos. That was baby B. And baby A, whose bris is supposed to be on Friday, never got his bris on Friday. And Shabbos comes, there's no mitzvah to do right now. Baby A, it's not the 8th day for baby A, it's the 9th day, and so the bris doesn't supersede Shabbos, no mitzvah to do. Baby B already had his bris on Friday, now it doesn't have an obligation right now to do because there's no bris to be done. So therefore there is no mitzvah to be done at that point, and therefore is going to be obligated because it's not a Torah b'dvar mitzvah. He doesn't have a mitzvah to do. Shalei nitna Shabbos litchas. Now we turn to Ayin Beis Amid Beis 72b. Because at such a scenario, there is no mitzvah to be done. The Seifa, nitna Shabbos litchas etzlei. But in the second scenario, the scenario is that he had a baby on Shabbos to do, and a baby's bris that needed to be done on Sunday. And he brought the Sunday bris onto Shabbos, where there is an obligation to bring a bris to do a bris today, and therefore Rabbi Meir says that would be exempt. And similarly, in regards to the shochet for communal karbanos, that in regards to a communal carbon, there is an obligation to bring the offerings of Shabbos. Now, even though he brought the karbanos already, but there were obligations on that day. And since on today, he's trying to bring a carbon, which there are karbanos to be brought today, he's confused and busy. And even though that it has already been brought, since he brought today's karbanos have already been brought, since there is a carbon to be brought today, if he brought others in its name for its intent, it's going to count. So and over here, in regards to the carbon, since he did have obligations of that day. So basically what Rabbi Meir is saying, the way in the Academy of Rabbi Yanai, they're saying, according to Rabbi Meir, if there were no obligations today, you thought there was an obligation today, but there are none. That's the first scenario, where baby A's bris was supposed to be on Friday, never got done. Baby B's bris was supposed to be on Shabbos, but was done already on Friday. So when we get to Shabbos, without any mistakes, there's nothing to do. And therefore, therefore, if you did the bris, when there actually is no mitzvah to be done, you're held accountable because there was no mistake of a mitzvah because you didn't have a mitzvah in front of you. Whereas in the second scenario, where there are two babies in front of you, one has supposed to have a bris on Shabbos, one on Sunday, you actually have an obligation today to do a bris. And so therefore, you're going to be exempt because you tried to do a mitzvah that you have, and even though that in the end you may not have done a mitzvah properly, but nevertheless you tried to do a mitzvah, you're going to be exempt from having a sin offering, bringing a sin offering for transgressing Shabbos. Similarly, Rabbi Meir says in regards to carbon, even though that the karbanos have already been brought, You've already fulfilled all the obligations of the day, but you had obligations today. So you have that intentionality and you have that focus to try and do the mitzvahs of the day. And so if you brought another carbon with the intent of it being the obligation of the day, you're not held accountable for breaking Shabbos because you tried to do a mitzvah. A mitzvah has been done, even though that you weren't supposed to do it anymore, but there were mitzvahs of the day, so you had to focus. Amalei Rav Ashi Rav Kahana Hachanami Harenit the Shabbos L'Tchasitzel Tinoikas the Alma. So, well, every day also you have that obligation. You should be bringing him every Shabbos. There's a baby out there that needs a bris. Amalei, yeah, but Lagabe the high Gavram this person has no reason to be worried about somebody else's bris. He's trying to take care of the babies that he knows need a bris. And that's what's going on. That in the first scenario, he's got no mitzvahs to do because he has no babies to focus on. In the second scenario, he has mitzvahs to do, and that's why he's going to be exempt. So the Mishnah said, all other karbanos, that it's the 14th day in Nisan, everybody's bringing a carbon Pesach, and you brought another offering that's not supposed to be a carbon Pesach, and you brought it as a carbon Pesach. So it's going to depend. Is it something that's worthy of being a carbon Pesach? Then Rabbi Yeshua says you're going to be exempt. If it's unworthy of being a carbon Pesach, it's a calf, meaning it's not a lamb or a goat, it's not in its first year, it's not a male, then it's not going to be a valid carbon. So Mantana Dashani Lebein Ru'uyin L'Shein. Whose opinion is this? That makes a distinction between whether it is a Shchita Ru'uya, a carbon that's worthy, that's valid, that could be valid, or not. Rabbi Shimon, this is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. The Tanya, as we learned. Whether this offering is worthy of being the carbon that you intended for or not, or if you intend it as a communal carbon. Pater, the Rabbi Meir says you're going to be exempt because you're trying to do a mitzvah, so you're going to be exempt regardless. To which Rabbi Shimon says to Rabbi Meir, no. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua never disagreed in regard to that matter, in regards to something that is not worthy, is not really within the category of being the carbon you're intending it for. Shechayev. And everybody will agree you're held liable for breaking Shabbos because this is not a valid carbon. So it's only going to be a disagreement, Rabbi Shimon says, between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Eliezer in regards to something that is worthy of being a carbon. Rabbi Eliezer says, nevertheless, you transgress Shabbos, you bring a sin offering. And Rabbi Yeshua says, no, you intended to do a mitzvah. And indeed, it is a valid carbon, so you did a mitzvah, and it could have been the carbon that you're supposed to be doing. So therefore, you're exempt of a carbon, because this could have been. So it's a reasonable mistake because it could have been the carbon that you thought. Amar Rav Bevai, Amar Rabbi Elazar. So Rav Bevai said in the name of Rabbi Elazar, Poiter haya Rabbi Meir afil be'egel shel zivchei shalamim. That Rabbi Meir exempted even if it was a calf. It was a cow, and not something that could have been a Pesach. It could only have been a Shlamim. So he should have known, and nevertheless, he's going to be exempt because he tried to do a mitzvah and did a mitzvah. Sheshachta l'shem Pesach. Since he shechted it for a Pesach, and it's a time of Pesach, even though that he should have known that an egel, a calf, is not something worthy of being a carbon Pesach. Amalei Rabbi Zera le Rav Bevai. So Rabbi Zera said to Rav Bevai, "V'amar Rabbi Yochanan Moida Rav Meir b'Bali Mumin." But Rabbi Meir said that if the animal had a blemish, then that he should have noticed, and it doesn't count as trying to make him do a mitzvah. He's not going to be exempt because he tried to do a mitzvah, because he should have known this is not a valid mitzvah because it had a blemish. No, anytime an animal has a blemish, why are you even trying to bring this as a carbon? You know that it can't be a carbon. Whereas in a calf, it's true, it can't be a carbon Pesach, but it can be a carbon. So he's already been working with this animal, thinking, I got to bring this up. I made this vow that I'm going to bring a shlamim, and he brings it and with him when he does the pilgrimage, and he brings his carbon Pesach, and he's thinking, all right, I got to do this. And so he made the mistake and brought it. But there's no mistake in bringing a blemished offering. Why would you even be bringing this? You know that this can't be valid. But in the calf, he is busy bringing it as a carbon. So Rava asked, based on this, what about it's an animal that's never been designated as a carbon? So really, you're not thinking about, I got to bring this as a carbon, but it could be. It looks like it could be. It could be a valid carbon. So Mali Amar Rabbi Meir, what would Rabbi Meir say about that? He said, yeah, indeed, Rabbi Meir would exempt even in such a case, even though that's not meant as a carbon at all. But you have no reason to not bring it as a carbon because you think that it could be. Wait, but Rabbi Yochanan said Rabbi Meir holds him responsible if the animal had a blemish. Again, we said, if it has a blemish, you're not going to make a mistake with it. But this unattributed animal, this animal that has no designation as a carbon, nevertheless, you're going to be held responsible on account of that. You're trying to bring it as a carbon because it looks like it could be a carbon, and you somehow got it mixed up in amongst your animals that you're bringing as a carbon. The time of Rabbi Meir, as the reasoning of Rabbi Meir is mishum echlufi, because he can confuse it, v'lo yechlufi, or it won't get confused with another animal. Wait, is that really the reason? But he said a calf, which is of a shlamim, and a calf can't be confused as a Pesach because it's a very different animal. One's a cow and one's a sheep or a goat. And yet Rabbi Meir says you're exempt because you shechted it as a Pesach, l'shem Pesach. So you see, the reason is not because you're going to confuse it in a carbon, but rather because you're busy trying to bring it as a carbon, and you forgot that it was the time for a different carbon. Amalei, so he said to him, actually, it's both of these. Tarid, afagavle, michlaf, afagavle, tarid. It's one of the two. As long as it either could be the carbon, so you confuse it as a carbon, or it's something you already designated as a carbon, a different carbon, and you're busy in your mind, I got to take this up, I got to bring it to Yerushalayim, I got to bring it to the Beis HaMikdash, I have to bring it as a carbon, and so you're busy and you're mentally focused on it, and so you brought it. So one of those two is enough to say, look, you tried to do a mitzvah. La'afuke balamumin. But what's excluded is bali mumin, something that has a blemish, that you should not have confused it, and you're also not busy trying to bring it as a carbon because there should be because it should never be a part of your herd that you're bringing as a carbon. Tomorrow we'll continue with these ideas of b'dvar mitzvah, making a mistake in a mitzvah.